This is Perfume on a leaf, and everyone online will tell you Britain had purity laws that banned aromatics. This is British, it's perfumed, and it comes from the last tobacco manufacturer left in England. This is Ennerdale Flake, and it's part 1 of 2. Bob's Chocolate Flake won the poll, and it's next. I actually started doing the research for that video, and a few hours in, I realized I couldn't make it. Every time I tried to explain what Bob's is, I had to explain what an English aromatic is. And to explain that, I had to explain where these floral blends come from, and why people believe British law banned flavored tobacco. And there's a version of this you see outright that British blenders wanted to flavor tobacco, couldn't, and used essential oils as a kind of loophole, that the florals are a workaround. So the Bob's video kept collapsing into this one. At some point it was easier to admit that and make this first. So one thing before we start, I'm a scientist and researcher by training, not a historian, and reading Victorian legislation is definitely not my field, but I have primary sources, which is what I know how to work with. The statute itself, the parliamentary duty, a book on snuff published in 1840, not forum posts and not someone else's summary. And I wrote to Gawith Hoggarth. Rachel Gawith runs the company. She's a direct descendant of the man who started it in 1792, 7 generations on, and it's the only remaining tobacco manufacturer in England. She corrected several things I had wrong, and I've left those corrections in rather than quietly fixing them. And I should be clear about this because I'm about to spend a while praising a company's product and their history, but this isn't sponsored. I bought this with my own money at retail like anyone else. I contacted them for information and nothing else. No product, no payment, no arrangement. Gawith Hoggarth corrected my research, and that was it. I told them before they ever answered me that my review would be honest regardless, and the historical photographs in this video come from Stricklandgate House and Kendal Civic Society, not from the company. So this review is kind of split in two. There's the blend, and then there's the history behind why it tastes like this. If you're only here for the review, it'll be chaptered. The tasting notes and verdict are marked, but give the history a minute first, because it'll answer a question this hobby gets wrong constantly. One more thing, I'm going to be moving pretty quickly through some of this. There's a lot of material here, and I'd rather keep it dense than padded out. Nothing in this video is filler, so I'm not going to slow down to fill time. If it's too fast, drop the playback speed. And the sources are all linked below if you want to sit with any of it properly. So it smells amazing, and we're going to get into why it smells so good. I smell rose, citrus, vanilla, and almond. Ennerdale Flake is produced by Gawith Hoggarth. I mean, look at that. They don't make flakes like this anymore. Maybe Rattray's Marlin Flake. It's beautiful and long, and the moisture is perfect. Granted, this was bulk, so I have it sitting in my jar. But look at this. This is a unit of flake. You have to hold it gently, it's like a baby. So it's predominantly Virginia, with leaf coming from Brazil, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. Sun-cured Malawi goes in for sweetness and strength, and there's a little burley to keep it cool. Then the Lakeland style flavoring on top, which is what gives it the aroma. What I'm expecting is what Americans call a Lakeland. And I should say the nicknames this category gets in the States are pretty unkind and mostly about soap and perfume and other people's grandmothers. But I'm not going to use them because I actually love this stuff. This is Perfume on a leaf. I expect rose, citrus, blossom, vanilla, almond. I expect it to taste like baked goods topped with a complex jam. Now, it doesn't necessarily taste like that. It's meant to be enjoyed nasally, and we'll get into this. But opening the jar, the room already smells better. Opening it is a gift to everyone in the house. I paid $8.17 an ounce. So what is a Lakeland? This idea of the Lakeland essence. Everyone will tell you it's a region in the UK, a town called Kendal in Cumbria. We're going to get into why an entire category of aromatics is named after one place. And whether I like Lakelands, I think they're one of the greatest genres of tobacco. So there are a few different definitions of an English blend. One is a blend that comes from England. That's very easy, not a blurred line at all. The other is blends that comply with Great Britain's tobacco purity laws. And Britain did pass tobacco legislation in the 1840s. There is a real document. It's an Act of Parliament from 1842, and its formal name is 5 and 6 Victoria, Chapter 93. I'll come back to it properly later to show you the text. For now, that's the law everyone means when they say British purity laws. The claim I kept finding on forums and on YouTube is that you couldn't add anything to tobacco. Tobacco and water, nothing else. And that's why English blends are what they are. And there's a second half to it that I want to deal with directly, that florals got around the ban. That essential oils were a technicality British blenders exploited because oils weren't technically flavoring or weren't technically covered, sneaking perfume past the excise man, basically. It's a good story, but it's also backwards. People compare it to the Reinheitsgebot, the German beer purity law. Beer's water, barley, and hops, so tobacco must be tobacco and water. The difference is what the documents do. Bavaria restricted what beer could be made from. Britain never restricted what tobacco could taste like. I went and read the act. The claim is wrong, and it's wrong in a specific and interesting way. There's a second section that nobody ever quotes, and it says pretty much the opposite of what people think the law said. So this is my Lakeland pipe. It's a Brewer apple with a horn stem. I think it cost around $65. It's beautiful, it's cheap, and it's great for flakes. I use this one only for Lakelands because the essence is strong. It will ghost anything. If it's your first time with this, cut straight through with scissors. It normalizes any variability in how the leaf is layered, and it rubs out into this perfect fine ribbon. Somewhere between a shag and a ribbon, it's beautifully thin. So nobody's gonna give you a straight answer on what this burns burns like, because everyone has a different experience. To me, this is vanilla, that's the easiest one to discern immediately, followed by citrus. In A Pinch of Snuff, published in 1840, 2 years before that 1842 act, Benson Earl Hill describes an ingredient called Attar-gul. Attar is Arabic for perfume, and gul is Persian for rose. He lists it in Violet Strasbourg, a snuff of râpé and bitter almonds with ambergris and Attar-gul added. So hold on to that. A scented snuff, named and sold, described in print 2 years before the act was written. It matters later. But I feel like you're getting some of that here. It's subtle and it's beautiful. Now, what does it taste like? It's hard to explain because it doesn't taste the way it smells, but I'd say it errs on the side of popcorn. It's crazy smooth. It can bite, so be careful, and it produces moisture because I'm smoking it wet. I wouldn't smoke it dry. It needs to be a little wet. It's so well made, I don't want to tamper with it. So the first third is floral baked blossoms with a hint of something like popcorn. I'm not sure it is popcorn. I think it's the very smooth natural tobacco underneath the essence. The ash is relatively standard. It burns about average, and you're getting the tobacco's natural sweetness, complemented by the perfume. It isn't a sweet perfume, it's a floral one. So while this burns, let's talk about the law. 5 and 6 Victoria, Chapter 93, Royal Assent, 10th of August, 1842. It amends an act from 1840 that had discontinued the excise survey on tobacco. 2 years without inspectors in the factories, and this is what follows. The preamble sets out the problem. Manufacturers were introducing articles other than tobacco either as substitutes or to increase the weight. Duties were suffering and drawbacks were being claimed on adulterated tobacco. The stated purpose is protection of revenue. So section 1. In manufacturing tobacco, water only. For snuff, water, or water and salt, or alkaline salts, or lime water in what it calls Welsh or Irish snuff. 300 pounds if you don't. Section 2 exempts scenting. No penalty for scenting or flavoring snuffs, provided you use the essential oils usually made use of for that purpose, and no penalty for using oil in making up spun or rolled tobacco. Section 5 is a possession offense, so sugar, treacle, molasses, honey, none of it on the premises. Family use accepted, and the manufacturer carries the burden of proof. Then chicory, malt roots, lime, sand, ochre, earths, seaweed, wood, moss, weeds, and any leaves not being tobacco leaves. And then the clause that defines the category: any substance, liquid, syrup, or preparation capable of being used as a substitute for tobacco or to increase its weight. Honey is sitting in a list with sand and ochre, and the thing they have in common isn't flavor, it's weight. Scenting and flavoring for any snuffs expressly exempt. That's not a gap or an oversight, and it isn't something anyone had to be clever about. Parliament wrote flavored snuff into the statute and said it doesn't count. And note the wording: only the essential oils usually made use of for that purpose. The statute defers to what the trade was already doing rather than defining a list. Back to the bowl for a second because it's moved on while I've been reading legislation at you. It's still floral, it's still beautiful, and this isn't even the best Lakeland in my opinion. There's another one from the same company that I'll do in the future. This is what I'd call a typical Lakeland, and I don't think it's the best one. But I still love it. A lot of people hate it. The smoke is thick and billowy, it bites, so be careful, but it's a beautiful smoke. If you come from a culture where there's a lot of incense, this is one of those floral incenses. It's made to be enjoyed by you and the people around you. A lot of aromatics try to be a dessert, and this one doesn't. It tries to be a perfume, and it really works. So relights are few, if any. I did the True Light, and it's been going ever since. It's so good, I don't want to stop puffing, so I just have to be conscious of it getting hot. Okay, we still have the obvious question, and honestly, it's the one I wanted to answer. Why carve out essential oils? Because what they cost to produce. So this is from Cooley's Cyclopedia of Practical Receipts, 6th edition, 1880, revised by Tucson, citing Raybaud. 3 ounces from 100 oranges. There's 16 ounces to a pound, so a pound of bergamot oil works out to the rind of about 530 oranges, and that's before you count labor or fuel or stills. So now put that against 3 shillings a pound for duty on tobacco. I mean, adulteration only really works downhill. You add something cheap and sell it at the price of something dear, so sand into tobacco, that's the trade. But nobody adds 500 oranges worth of oil to a pound of leaf in order to save 3 shillings of tax. And Cooley tells you the direction of travel himself. They were faking the bergamot, rather than using bergamot to fake anything else. So the exemption more or less polices itself. Parliament didn't have to trust manufacturers or measure anything because the arithmetic made it pointless. You can ban the cheap heavy things by name and let the expensive light ones through. Now sources for this section are Gawith Hoggarth's own history and the Stricklandgate House Trust. There's a figure on a wall on Lothier Street in Kendal. A Saracen, or a Turk, smoking a long-stemmed pipe and holding a roll of tobacco. He's a trade sign. In the 18th and 19th centuries, you advertised with an object, because a lot of your customers probably couldn't read, so a key for a locksmith or a boot for a cobbler. Kendal had a bristly hog over a brush factory, and the Turk comes from the Turk's Head Coffee House in London, where Samuel Johnson and others took their snuff with their coffee. The current one went up in 1975, and the Kendal Civic Society paid to have it restored and repainted in 2009. So why is there a snuff sign on a wall in Cumbria? Snuff arrives in Britain in 1702, when Sir George Rooke captures a Spanish treasure fleet. Among the cargo were thousands of kegs of really good snuff, which got shared out among the sailors and ended up in the London coffee houses. It was cheaper than pipe tobacco, and it got treated operated as a bit of a cure-all for toothache, colds, and even the plague. Tobacco came into the west coast ports, Whitehaven, Workington, Maryport, which in the 17th and 18th centuries were busier than Liverpool and Bristol. In 1739 and 1740, 4.5 million pounds of tobacco came through Whitehaven alone, and Kendal was a route centre, a staging post, like overnight stop, with as many as 350 pack horses moving through the town every week. So from the coast, it was a difficult day's journey. So the leaf came over the mountains, jostling the whole way, and a lot of it arrived broken up, mostly dust and stalks instead of whole leaf, which made it more or less worthless as smoking tobacco, so it sold cheap. But if you're making snuff, broken leaf isn't a defect, it's the raw material, because you were going to grind it anyways. So the town's whole industry more or less starts with somebody working out that ruined cargo could be valuable. The other half is the River Kent and its tributaries the Mint and the Sprint. Snuff needs grinding, and grinding needs power. Snuff had been made in Kendal for years. Then in 1790, a Kendal man named Thomas Harrison went to Glasgow, which was the recognized centre of tobacco and snuff manufacture in the whole British Isles, to learn how to do it mechanically. He came back in 1792 with a complete snuff plant, dismantled, to just north of Kendal, and he brought back a formula. That formula became Kendal Brown, the best-selling snuff the town ever produced, and it's still being made. There's one place my sources disagree. Stricklandgate House says Kendal had skilled workers available because the woolen industry was in decline. The company says that isn't really how it went, that the town was already industrialized with snuff factories operating, but I'll just present to you both. So snuff is made by grinding tobacco to powder and adding ingredients and essential oils. Camphor, menthol, spices. Kendal Brown, for example, is flavored with camphor. And Harrison stored the powder at a house in Highgate to mature before it was flavored, packed, and sold. Harrison's son, also Thomas, took the firm over when his father died, and around 1830 bought 27 Lowther Street as both his house and the factory. In 1838, his daughter Jane eloped to Gretna Green with a young Kendal man named Samuel Gawith. Her father was against it, but he came around, and when he died in 1841, he left them the business. Samuel Gawith was elected mayor of Kendal at 48, so the name on the tin belongs to a man who married into the business and ended up as mayor of the town. Rachel Gawith runs it now, 7th generation, and it's the only remaining tobacco manufacturer in England. 250 years on, and Kendal is still making flake, twist, and snuff. So why does it smell like perfume? Because these are snuff ingredients, and snuff is sniffed. Rose, bergamot, camphor, those are perfumey oils, and they're in here because they went into snuff first. Snuff isn't burnt, and it isn't really tasted. It goes up your nose. So the whole point of the additive is the smell. That's the only sense involved. So these oils were chosen to produce an aroma rather than a flavor, because with snuff, the aroma was the entire product. And when the same firm started making tobacco to smoke, using the same oils in the same building, the perfume came along with it, which is why a pipe tobacco ends up smelling like something you'd wear, since the formulation was worked out for a nose rather than a tongue. Their own description of snuff is dried tobacco leaf ground to powder and blended with essential oils and essences. The scenting isn't an addition to the product, it's part of what makes it the product. And in the early operation, the grinding happened at the mill and the flavoring happened back at the shop in Kendal. So scenting was a distinct step in the process from the beginning. So the part I had wrong, I had a tidy story when I started. I sent it to Rachel Gawith and she corrected me. So here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that the 1842 Act protects these blends currently. That's long repealed. I'm not saying that today's floral blends run unbroken from 1792. They don't. Floral flavorings on pipe tobacco are relatively recent. And I'm not saying most of what they make is floral. It isn't. The majority has no floral flavoring at all. I asked Rachel about the name too. Americans call it Lakeland because they associate that profile with Gawith tobaccos, and the company sits on the edge of the Lake District. She also noted other brands have a similar profile. So there's no shelf in Kendal labeled Lakeland Essence. It's a name American smokers gave to a profile that they attach to a company in a region that company happens to be near. So there was no purity law. It was an excise law, and it was about weight. Duty was charged by the pound, so anything you could add that weighed something was effectively theft from the treasury, whether it's sugar, honey, sand, ochre, or moss. But flavoring was never banned. Section 2 permitted it outright. So the florals weren't a loophole because there was nothing to get around. And while I've been talking about 18th century Cumbria, this has gotten to the bottom of the bowl, but it's still floral. The essence doesn't fade, it just changes, and you're still getting the strong perfume, and it's welcome if you love Lakelands. The smoke stays thick, billowy, creamy, and equally floral. In the last bit, you get more of that popcorn, but it's still smooth. Such a beautifully made flake. It's almost funny. The Sun Bear would have been illegal under the Tobacco Act. Not because it's flavored, but because the honey adds weight and the excise is calculated by weight. So as I said in the beginning, I'm a scientist, not a historian. But what I can do is separate what I've verified from what I've inferred. So what we know is solid is the statute and what it says, the duty rates and Hill's book from 1840, as well as what the company says about the floral flavorings being relatively modern. That's the best source source we have available, and it's also their account of themselves. What I'm reasoning with is that the oils were exempt because they were too expensive to cheat with. The act never really says that. So I'd like to compare this against Ellipsis or Sun Bear, and I'm not going to. The reason is I won't cross genres here. Each one has its own seat at the table. But I will do a jar wars against my actual favorite Lakeland from the same company. So who's this for? This is for people who already smoke Lakelands and like them. If you already smoke and you've never tried one of these, Ennerdale is a reasonable place to start. Lakeland flakes definitely aren't for everyone, but they are for me. They're polarizing and everyone has their own preferences. There's no need to hate on someone for liking them, and plenty of people hate Latakia, plenty of people hate Perique, and that's fine. I think they're a great part of British history and an important blend to try in order to understand it. I don't think the hatred is warranted, so go in with an open mind. Now, is it worth the price? $8 an ounce isn't cheap, and for what's in the jar, I think it's fair value. That's if you think you might like Lakeland. If you don't like Lakelands, ignore everything I've said. This blend is not for you. I think it's underrated. I might get hate for that. If you disagree, tell me in the comments. So every historical image here is credited on screen as it appears, but I want to name the people properly. These photos were courtesy of Trevor Hughes with the Kendal Civic Society and Stricklandgate House Trust. They didn't have to say yes to a stranger with a YouTube channel, but they did. So thank you for the permission for the images. The Stricklandgate House is in the middle of a National Lottery Heritage Fund project. The target is £820,000, and they have $49,000 left to raise in match funding. That's the gap between it happening and not, and it's small enough that this video could plausibly move it. Stricklandgate House is on Just Giving, link in the description. If you enjoy Victorian excise law and this history, these are the people who keep this material accessible. So a note on my sources, I used 2 accounts of the early history and they don't fully agree. Where any other source versus Gawith Hoggarth's own history conflict, I've gone with the company because it's their family and Rachel Gawith asked me to. Neither is wrong, so much is written from different vantage points, which is normal for local history. Last bit of admin, thank you to everyone who subscribed recently. It genuinely means a lot, especially the ones who were here at the start. The poll currently favors Bob's Chocolate Flake. It's going to be next either way. Polls decide what I review, so vote in them. And if there's something you want covered, leave it in the comments. There's a strong chance I already have it. I'll have links to all my sources in the description and a lot of the information on screen. And thank you to Rachel Gawith, 7th generation, for answering an unsolicited email from someone with a small YouTube channel. And for correcting me rather than letting it go wrong. The full flavor profile is at the very end. I wanted the historical context for English blends, Lakeland essences, and English aromatics before moving on to Bob's Chocolate Flake. I consider Ennerdale a modern blend born from old tradition, which is what makes it the clearest way into the history. Bob's Chocolate Flake is next, and it'll make more sense with this behind it. Part 2.